All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am really glad to be here today with my friend Christi Belcourt. We haven't seen each other in quite some time, and we never got to know each other super well. But I always enjoyed the time that we did have to spend together. We met up at Thunder Mountain, which is a place some of you will have heard me mention from time to time. Christy is an artist and an activist and does wonderful, beautiful things in both those spheres. And yeah, maybe I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, and we'll see where it goes from there. We can talk about art and prayer and how those things connect.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christi Belcourt. I am a Métis artist. My ancestry, I descend from the Métis community of Lac Sainte Anne in Alberta. I was born and raised in Ontario, Anishinaabeg territory. I was born in Scarborough, didn't live there very long before we moved, my parents moved. And then we went to Ottawa, then we went to Edmonton, then we came back to Ottawa, and we were sort of all over the place. And I was raised pretty much in Ottawa, and I have lived along the North Shore of Lake Huron in Anishinaabeg territory for about 20 odd years, I guess. And yeah, I'm an artist. It's not much more to say. That's it. That's my whole introduction. Yeah.
There you go. Well, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad you decided to come on and chat with me. There's some of your art that I see pop up on Facebook, and every once in a while it just matches exactly what's been going on in my own inner spiritual life kind of thing, and there seems to be some kind of synchronicity or connection with it. I remember you did one a little while ago that was the sturgeon looking up at the stars and it reflecting like that. And that's a teaching I remember hearing from Isaac out in the bush. And I had actually just had someone, Craig Yingst, who doesn't know anything about Indigenous culture at all and is a wonderful artist down in the US. And he offered to do the cover for one of my books. And without knowing any of that, he put six fish with all these stars around them at the bottom, reflecting the sky. And then the same day, your thing showed up on Facebook. And I was like, oh, as if. But that's just a little anecdote. I would love to hear from you how your art speaks, or if you think it speaks, or if you speak through it, or I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think art's alive, and I wonder if you do too. But,
Um, I don't know how to answer that question. Uh, yeah, I don't know if I've ever actually thought of art as being alive. So I'm not going to answer that question because
sure.
now you made me think, and now I'm going to have to go think, where do I stand on that? I don't want to just blurt out yes or no because I actually haven't really thought of it in that way before.
Mhm.
Um, but I believe rocks are alive, and I
Yeah.
believe trees and plants and the whole earth is alive. So, in that context, art is part of it, and so why wouldn't it also be alive if everything else is alive? But I don't, I don't really know. So I'd have to. That's okay. Really tough question out of the gate
My apologies. You're
that I
welcome to
cannot
just dodge
answer.
questions. That's totally fair.
But I will talk about the painting that you referenced. It's called The Fisher Fasting.
Yeah.
And the longer title is The Fisher Fasting for Knowledge from the Stars. And that does come from a story that Isaac tells um, about how at a certain time in the winter, when it's likely the coldest, there's about a week or so of time during that period where the fish will hang instead of swimming, horizontally, they'll hang vertically. And he says that the belief is that they will be gaining knowledge at that time, fasting for a short period, gaining knowledge from the stars, and that when you consume those fish, when you catch and you eat those fish, then you're eating some of that knowledge, from that they've uh, absorbed into their body. And I think that's just it's such a beautiful, imaginative way to view the world, and in a way that like brings the magic of life and the miracle of life into the idea of everything being connected, the idea of the star world. informing not only our species for since the beginning of time, but other species. That they also gain knowledge from stars is kind of like a nice thought, and then the idea also of you when you consume an animal, that you are consuming what they also bring with them. So their feelings are in there as well, and in a non sort of a non in a non-religious way. Um, the belief that I've been taught is that you're not supposed to consume the suffering of animals. And I have heard Isaac talk about that, but I've also heard my aunt talk about that a lot, where she said, if there was an animal that is harmed, like tortured, suffered during its death, it's likely you shouldn't consume it. Indigenous people, we've always had this really important connection to the animals and treating them with respect because our lives depend on it is innate within our existence, right? It's not like even a thing that people have to necessarily teach. It's something that just comes with kind of thing. And so there's this understanding that you don't want to like make an animal suffer, and you don't want to consume that suffering. And then conversely, um, the idea that whatever goodness they've had from the land, whatever medicines they've eaten, whatever dreams they've had, whatever, um, all of that goodness also, that health comes into our bodies and helps to keep us healthy, which is why we are so incredibly grateful all the time for their lives and why we have to walk softly and be respectful of not taking too much. That is one of our laws that is really that I see observed across Indigenous nations. One of the most basic laws that's most widely spread is you only take what you need. And so this it stands in such stark contrast to ideas behind capitalism, insatiable growth, and the things that are unsustainable. So Indigenous people have, as you know already, Justin, the way that we feel about everything is through a holistic lens of everything being interconnected. And so sometimes it's really hard to distill out the spirituality from sort of some of the taboos, some of the laws, some of the things. They're all it's really just one. And I mean, I suppose you could start to pull the threads and put them in their different categories if you really wanted to, but most people don't do that. They just sort of consider it a whole in the way that we see our lives and the purpose of our lives here.
And I think that's a much better way because once you start to pull it apart, it's no longer a tapestry, it's just a pile of strings. And the beauty is in the quilt, not in the pile of strings. And I remember lots of times in ceremony, I've heard the elders say the language is the land, is the ceremony, is the traditions, is the crafts and the hunting and the canoe building, and it's all one thing that has to be understood together. And it always makes me lament I never was any good at learning the language or any of the songs, even. Although I sat in ceremony lots. But I know there's a piece I was always missing there without having the language, and all of that.
Yeah, that's by design. I mean, our
Mm-hmm.
people were never past we across North America, not just even North America, wherever wherever colonial uh, entities went to occupy land and dominate the indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that they always did was bring in their form of what they deemed was education. And that was intentional, as we already know very clearly, to eradicate any connection that people would have to the land, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
to the land, to the ceremonies, to the, they passed it off as being something because they thought they were superior, but it really had this really nefarious purpose to it. And so by disconnecting us to our language, it severed a lot of knowledges, and that was intentional. So nobody should carry shame for not knowing their language. Any Indigenous people that don't know their language should not be shamed for that. It's nobody's fault. And nobody should carry shame for not teaching their kids either, because the shame that they were taught closed their throat up and made it impossible for them to teach their children. And this is a phenomena that's across the board. If it was just isolated, like almost like as if it was an individual choice, then that would be different. But because it's so widespread, then we shouldn't be carrying that as something that we need to feel guilty for. I just want to say that because a lot of times when you're, uh, especially in ceremony, right? Sometimes you will hear somebody say, if you don't understand the language, you can't really fully be understanding the prayers or understanding or really fully be connected. And I understand what that teaching is trying to say, which is that the philosophy and the way the worldview is expanded and expansive when you understand the language and you understand it from outside of an English colonial mind, and that becomes deeper, clearer. And so I get it. But when that kind of thought is translated into English and heard with an English ear, it can feel hurtful because of the shame that we can carry for not knowing our languages. So it can be interpreted as I will never be fully connected in ceremony because I don't know the language. And then we carry that as an added layer of shame. So, I've been, trying to think of this through the fact that my spirit, that I really believe that creator and the spirit world understand all languages, because it's not really about language so much as it is about the universal intent and the universal language, the universal understanding, which goes beyond the confines of a spoken word, which can be translated from song, translated from offerings, translated from whatever. And I really feel that the spirit world understands all languages, and that we shouldn't feel like our prayers are less than because we can't understand our language, which wasn't our fault to begin with. That's how I feel about it. I know that there's some strong opinions out there. But I'm just going to add my strong opinion to the strong opinions, And
Yeah.
and as I always say, I could be completely wrong. Like I'm open to being wrong. And I have been wrong a lot in my life and had to, eat some what's that called? When you have to like humble
Oh, humble
pie.
pie.
Yeah.
Humble pie. Yeah.
You're like, yeah, okay, I was really wrong about that. Yeah. That happens lots, and I doubt that, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to happen for the rest of my life.
That seems likely.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me as well, of course. Yeah. No, I very much appreciate you sharing that. I mean, just to clarify, I'm actually not Indigenous at all. I'm the child of hippies, so I grew up in ceremony. Started going to sweats when I was 11 or 12 with William Commanda out in Maniwaki. But I'm not Indigenous at all, and so I don't have the language at all in my home or community or anything like that. Growing up, I just attended ceremony, but didn't live in any of the communities.
Yeah, I knew that, but I
Oh,
thought
okay,
that
yeah, yeah,
what I would do is speak to it because you might
hmm
have audience members who
yeah.
are Indigenous and who have experienced that. So I thought maybe it might be something that might be resonate with people.
No, I'm sure it will. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can relate to it in a sense on the level of being that level of shame of like I don't know if I really fit in here, or if I really belong here, if I should be here or not. And sometimes people telling me I shouldn't be, and lots of people, of course, being kind and telling me that I'm welcome as well. trying to struggle with that, and how those layers of shame, I think they impact our ability to engage with ceremony. Because I was kind of blindly ignorant to all of that for a while, and then and then it started to surface more, and I started to see it more, and I started to get that sense of shame, and all of a sudden I wasn't the eager helper who was engaged and knew all the teachings. Now I was this kind of quiet guy who didn't know how to talk to anybody, and it shifted for me in there. And so I'm glad you brought it up, because I think those layers of shame in any context, they just somehow shut us down to, it's like every layer of shame is a layer of us that's sort of turned off.
It's true.
But
It can have the effect of
mhm,
silencing people or making them less enthusiastic to participate in a way that might be beneficial to the whole.
mhm,
You know, shame is a really powerful negative emotion, and it does what it's intended to do, right? Which is to disempower the person who's carrying it. And I think also too, though, just speaking to the idea of non-Indigenous in Indigenous spaces and in Indigenous ceremony, it's up to the person who's conducting the ceremony,
mhm,
um, which will vary from ceremony to ceremony of of the kind of people that they will want in their circles and
mhm,
in the ceremony. And I think that it is a little bit uh, like I think because there's such hardship already for
mhm.
Indigenous people to access ceremony,
Yeah.
for Indigenous youth to participate in ceremony, whether that's through like just physically being able to access it, maybe by virtue of where they live or by their inability to like travel to where ceremony is,
Mhm,
or the money that it might cost to participate in not paying for ceremony, but like helping out with gas or
yeah.
buying their own food or whatever, right?
Mhm,
Or having camping equipment at the ceremony. Like that, there's costs involved.
mhm.
People can't just travel on nothing most of the
Yeah.
time, and that can be prohibitive for Indigenous people, especially Indigenous youth. And
Mhm,
so there needs to be a prioritizing of Indigenous people in Indigenous spaces. And I don't I don't necessarily agree that non-Indigenous people should be I mean I don't agree that non wait, let me rephrase this. I'll just say it like this instead of saying agree or don't agree because I'm confusing my own self. Non-Indigenous people should not be leading Indigenous ceremonies.
mhm.
That's just the way I feel.
Yeah.
And should not be carrying the songs and should not be carrying anything.
Mhm,
That's just these are Indigenous ceremonies. Participation, 100%.
mhm,
Helper, 100%. Going in there for somebody's own spiritual growth, 100%, because there's universality of
mhm,
spirituality there between all peoples. But in terms of like just the actual practice, it gets very quickly into appropriation.
mhm,
So, like, I think that's where personally I draw the line. But yeah, and there should be more opportunity for for Indigenous youth to be brought up in to have access to those things so that they can carry it forward for their communities.
mhm.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. And it's actually the same conclusion that I came to, or that I was told by the spirits when I asked them. um, because there was a point in time where I was in school to be a teacher, and I realized I didn't like that, and I was doing I'd become established enough as a firekeeper. I was the head firekeeper at the Cutler Powwow, and I was paid sometimes to go to workshops and firekeep and that kind of thing. And I really just wanted to do ceremony my whole life. That it wasn't about being the leader for me. It was just about not having to do a job and all that, so that I can really just be in ceremony all the time. And I made a feast and I put it out in the bush. And I made my prayers and I said I want to feed my kids and have a roof over my head and I want to do ceremony, and I'm not sure how to make all those things happen. And a few days later, I got a telephone call from the small country preacher on Manitoulin Island saying, "We can't find a clergy person who wants to come out here. Have you ever thought about preaching?" And I said, well, no. Actually, I hadn't ever thought about preaching. That was not what I had in mind at all. But when I sat with it, I realized it was exactly the thing I had asked. How can I have a spiritual life that will also allow me to, live my life and feed my boys and that kind of thing? And so now that's the path that I'm on. I found Celtic Christianity, and it allows me to be a little more open to all the years I spent in ceremony and what I learned there. And I try and translate what I can that's universal into language that is our own, so to speak. But yeah, I wouldn't. I had to wrestle with the question. Someone gave me a pipe, actually. An Indigenous elder gave me a pipe. And then I went to another elder and I said, someone gave me this pipe. I don't know what to do with it. And they said, well, wrap it up and put it away. And it wasn't exactly the answer I wanted, right? Because you're all excited. Someone gave you a pipe. and
Oh, I know that feeling when it's not the answer you want.
yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you, this is not to do with spirituality, but I was doing a painting. I have a painting on the go right now. It's a large one, and I always had in mind that I was going to add a bunch of birds to the painting. So I did, and somebody that's I'm close to walked in and said, "Oh." And I thought, "Oh no." And then so I said, "Well, I'll ask my aunt because she's brutally honest." So I took a video and I went and said, "I'm thinking of erasing some of these birds, because I don't think maybe it's too much. What do you think?" And she goes, "None of them belong there." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean none of them belong there?" And she says, "Well, surely you must have known, otherwise you wouldn't have asked me." I was like, "Oh my God, okay." So I went and like I had to it took me a long time. The birds were
Yeah.
maybe some of the finest birds I've ever painted in my life. There was like 11 of them. And I had to take each and every one of them off. And then not only that, take them off, but recreate what was the branches that were underneath. So I had to like essentially repair my own work to make it seamless. And it took me a really long time, but I thought that is not the answer I wanted. I wanted her to tell me, oh, those are such beautiful birds.
Yeah.
Maybe just, just take a couple off, but keep the rest. But it wasn't, she was honest and I needed her to be honest. And
Yeah.
that was a little bit of that hurt. It hurt. It was like, oh my God, I love those birds, but I mean, not exactly as impactful and significant as the question of a pipe, you know. And I also don't judge a lot when it comes to that. I respect that an elder would have a reason for doing that. And I would just not within myself have a judgment about it. I would just think I would just keep it at that level, like that pure kind of level. That elder must have had a reason, and I just leave it like that within myself. So, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think it's true because for me the reason I don't know what the pipe is for. It's still wrapped up nicely, properly put away, waiting to find out what the reason for it is. I assume it's for someone else one day. I don't know. But what it taught me was that I was ready to start leading spiritual community
Mm,
for what the pipe symbolized. But I was just in the wrong spot, and I had learned what not even in the wrong spot, but it was just time for me to find a new spot to do that in, because everything I learned was so important, and I couldn't do the work I do now if it wasn't for all the years at Thunder Mountain and all the cutting wood and carrying water and all the elders talking and all that.
well,
But
the
yeah.
spiritual fabric of this earth is is one. So it really doesn't matter that you cut wood and carried water over here, or where if you cut wood and carried water over where your ancestry would have originally come from, right? Or half of my ancestry would have originally come from. It doesn't matter because the fabric of the life that's on the earth and the power of the earth is one. So, you by being connected to those that wood, that fire as a firekeeper is I think all humans have an earth-based spirituality. It's just that it became distorted through the written word and the power struggle that ensued over organized religion. But everyone's origins in were earth-based at one time. And then I just think like religion is the thing that has really veered it off its path. And then the people try through religion then to find the nuggets of truth that are those universal truths and keep that going. But the power itself is still one of distortion because it does pull people away from the earth in a way and creates hierarchies,
Yeah.
right? So within Christianity or within other organized religion, there is that hierarchy of mankind being higher. And you know from the ceremonies that you've attended and the teachings that you've received that that's not how we see things. And so you're able to convey that to the people that come to hear you, you know, and hopefully you'll be able to reach them in a way that they'll be able to see that universality that connects them back to the earth and makes them feel grounded and wanting to protect it, right? Because I find like a lot of exploitation of the earth was done through Christianity and is still being done through Christianity. So it's a distortion of through religion of spirituality. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that?
I think you're right in the general sense. I might, I'm an intellectual kind of person, so I like to nitpick things, and I might say that Christianity is one example of any religion which teaches that the world is something to be discarded for something else, and that actually lots of traditions around the world have that same problem as Christianity. So it's not. I'm not saying Christianity doesn't have it, but just that it's not necessarily
Exclusive.
unique to Christianity, and that in places like Buddhist China, perhaps I don't know their culture well enough, but perhaps the sense of this world being all illusion has something to do with their incredible environmental destruction. I'm not sure. But yeah, here and in the West, Christianity was the vehicle of that unfortunate mentality. And part of what I do is I go through all of the old texts, which Christianity as a written tradition has this beautiful thing, which is thousands of years of people talking about stuff that's written down. You get to have dialogues that cover millennia with people if you read all the medieval stuff, and there were plenty of Christians who understood nature as sacred. And there's one of my favorites, Aelred of Rivaux, who was in Scotland, and he writes in his book Spiritual Friendship about the way that, my apologies, I didn't turn my phone off. In his book Spiritual Friendship, he writes about the way that friendship is inherent in all things, and he has this sense of humans sort of above, but it's not a moral hierarchy. It's one that moves from less consciousness to more. I'm going to pause the recording for a second. There we go. I had to deal with some parenting, no problems, but just some parenting tasks. So thank you all.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Thank you
good.
all for your patience. But yeah, Aelred, as he describes friendship, he says, when you're looking in a riverbed, do you ever find one kind of stone all alone, or do you find them always in community with one another? And he says all the stones live in community with one another. You see, there's this kind of stone here, red stones over here, and there's, if there's white stones over there, there's going to be more than one. And then he says, look at also the trees. They grow in groves. They mix with others, but they live together in community. There, you don't find one tree of its own kind alone very often. And then he says, animals, look at them, the deer and the creatures who walk around the forest. They obviously love one another, and they're so able, he says, to live in friendship that you would think they're human beings, he says, in the way they demonstrate their friendship and their ability to work together and communicate and have that. And then he says, a wonderful not a new interpretation, because this guy's writing in the 1200s, but an interpretation that somehow didn't get into the mainstream of Adam and Eve and how friendship is present there. And he says when God divided Adam and Eve, he took Eve from Adam's side so that they could be equal. Because this, and he says very explicitly, this is a quality of friendship, that there is no one who is above or below anyone else, that all are equal in friendship, and that that's the natural law of the world which we conform to, is friendship and equality. And then he goes on to say even that the angels, God made 9 ranks of angels filled with choirs of angels so that thousands may share in the joy of friendship. And so for some Christians throughout the millennia, the earth has spoken to them and has been alive. And I love to find those teachings and try and bring them back, use those for sermons.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's beauty to be found in every belief system across the world. I think there's some truth in every single one. And it's that universality that honestly is the thing that's going to save us in the end. Is that because if we think that it's the violence of superiority that is what's really destroying everything. You know, that's the way I see it, is that it's supremacy, white supremacy or religious supremacy or whatever it is. It's that is comes inherently with violence, and that violence or even gender superiority, um, that that is what is really mucking everything up. So I like having discussions with people like yourself who are able to like pick out those commonalities, and then we can talk about like what are those things that are the same,
Yeah.
what are the things that unite us as people. Yeah, that was a beautiful quote too, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. And actually, as you were talking at the beginning about the fish looking up for wisdom, it made me think of a Celtic story, an Irish story, or Scottish story, depending who you ask, of Finn MacCool, who was a pre-Christian hero from the olden days. And the story goes that he was sent to live with a wise man in the bush as a child, to be reared by him, which was a common part of the society, that fostering your children with other people to have them, when they sort of hit that puberty age, to sort of have them learn and grow with other people in the community. And anyway, this wise man in the bush where Finn was living with and helping and that kind of thing, there was a pool, a wellspring that came up from the ground with 9 hazelnut trees around it. And 9 is the number of heaven, of the angels, and therefore of the stars, because the angels are the stars in the ancient and medieval world. Up until the modern world, most Christians thought the stars were angels. There's no reason we shouldn't. Anyway, and so the hazelnuts drop from these bushes into the well, and there are salmon that live there, and they eat the hazelnuts and they gain the wisdom of heaven. And so these salmon contain within them all the wisdom of heaven, just like you were saying. And the old man, I think it was, I'm trying to remember Finn's guy, Finnegan, maybe his name was, or something. But anyway, the wise man says to Finn, okay, now go catch one of those salmon and cook it on a spit here. The time has finally come for me to eat this salmon. After all these years I've spent here, I'm finally going to eat this salmon and gain its wisdom. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go make some preparations. And so Finn's sitting there cooking the fish on the fire for him, and the blister comes up on the fish's skin, and he sticks it with his thumb without thinking, and it burns him. And he goes, ouch. And he tasted the fish first, and so he gained the knowledge. And from then on, he could suck his thumb and have the knowledge of heaven and see the future and know what was best and wise.
Wow, that's a great superpower.
Yeah, yeah,
I sure
yeah.
wish I had that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But it's
Amazing.
cool how these themes, the more I learn about the stories in Europe that sort of predate Christianity, or predate the modernization and imperialization of Christianity, the sort of grassroots versions, the stories that are there, some of them have so much overlap with what I learned in ceremony of the Indigenous worldview. Even the idea in the Norse mythology, there's Thor, who lives at the top of a mountain, so there's a thunder god at the top of a mountain. And at the end of time, at Ragnarok, his destiny is to destroy the Midgard serpent, who lives at the bottom of the world tree and encircles it and lives in the waters. And you're nodding because that's a very familiar story of the thunderbirds fighting the serpents at the top of a mountain, and the water serpents at the bottom. And I remember I first read that, I was like, as if, like, how does that happen? Well, it happens, I guess, because they're telling real things. I don't know. What do you think about that? About the commonalities and those kinds of stories? Like,
Yeah, because I think that those beings are real.
yeah, yeah.
And I think
Tell
that
me
they're,
about that. I want to hear about that if you're willing.
well, so again, across
Yeah.
everywhere, it seems like a lot of Indigenous people have stories about thunderbirds or similar
Mm-hmm.
powerful birds or beings, serpents
Mm-hmm.
or water beings, right? And so you have these spiritual, powerful beings that people made offerings to, relied on for information. It was part of the fabric of the earth that people understood to be real. And uh, uh, through like Christianity, those things were put into the realm of myth.
Mm-hmm.
So they went from being real to being mythological creatures
Mm-hmm.
because Christianity was seeking to erase that connection that people had with those beings and the power of those beings. So because those beings are real, then it would make sense to me that everyone across the earth would have a certain amount of um, versions of them would make their way through story and through belief systems, which then would get sometimes lost and turned into like, oh, this is a myth, this is a story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people get connected back with them when they start to do the ceremonies that are like fasting and going out on the land and being part of all of that. Anyone who's a fisherman in the waters will likely have some belief system around the mystery that might be in the water or unexplained, the unexplained,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think that's the crime of organized religion to me is is the way in which they've tried to sever people's connection to belief in this really deep, complex spiritual web of spirits that exist on the earth
Mm-hmm.
and make it into just a simple like above below rather than all around.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets changed into, you know, there is only really one above below. You know, there's us in this hierarchy of God, us, and then creatures, and then below that is the earth. You know, whereas I think earth-based sort of belief systems are we're in this really complex fabric of of a spiritual realm
Mm-hmm.
that contains a lot of unexplained, a lot of mystery, and we're okay with not having solved all of it and not written it down. I find like um, that's just what I've noticed. You know, with I'm sorry, I feel like I'm putting down Christianity a lot, and maybe
Fine.
I am because maybe I have like a uh, I I have a what's that called? A resentment
Mm-hmm.
towards the conversion
Yeah.
of people that erased all of this, that tried to erase all of this magic and this beauty,
Mm-hmm.
when Indigenous people have maintained how to live on the earth in balance. And there's so much destruction and so much like we're facing the climate crisis. We're facing the extinction of so many like we are alive at the time of elephants and tigers and whales and things that are starting to and all sorts of birds and all sorts of other beings, other animals that are about to become extinct, and we are, we might be the last generation that has gotten to see the actual stars without satellites. That's a tragedy to me. There was so much potential to make this earth um, equal and fair and respectful to every living being that's here. And we carry that still, right? You carry it, I carry it, a lot of us carry it. Like there's lots of human beings all over the world that carry that, but we're outmanned and outgunned when it comes to it. It's just such a tragedy. And I feel like a lot of that has its origins in the establishment of the Christian Catholic power that they took when they started to establish it into an organized religion. And I feel like you look at what in Ireland, they have the little people. They have like all over the world, right? There's these teachings of either, like I said, birds or serpents or little people or whatever. Or people they understand the spirits of their lands and their waters, and that gets somehow removed because there was people trying to assert power and control, and they organize religion to do it. That's why I think I'm like angry also that I don't speak my language. I know that has
Yeah.
Christianity has something to do with that. And I think I'm frustrated that there was such a that people thought that they were civilized when
Yeah.
really they were the uncivilized ones. And
Huge so. Yeah.
they couldn't see our humanity, and they couldn't see the beautiful things that we had to offer the world. And I feel like a resentment towards that, I think. So yeah, I guess I am kind of against Christianity in a way. But that's hard for me to say out loud, even though we're doing it on a podcast. Don't show this to like my aunties from my community,
Yeah.
because they're very Catholic. Like my grandma was Catholic, my grandpa was Catholic, and they were proud of that. So like I don't want to offend anybody. But I have a best friend who's like Catholic, and I don't want to offend them. Like what they choose to believe is okay, and they find the beauty in that, and they find comfort and a guidance in it for their life to live a good, honorable life and a one of moral integrity. And I can't knock them for that at all. I think I'm sort of more talking about the establishment of the institution of organized religions that I find is like devoid of actual spirituality.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said all those things. I am a Christian who believes that if we want to be Christians, we need to be repentant of what's been done in the name of Christianity. Otherwise, we're not real Christians at all. And the truth will set you free, is what Jesus said. And so acknowledging that the Christian tradition has been corrupted and transformed into a tool of great evil, not even just like has some mistakes in it, but something much beyond that, into a machine of perpetrating grotesque and horrific evils on massive scales of genocide, and also lying. That it's not as bad as the genocide, but like just cheating and lying and stealing, and all in the name of, like you said, spreading. There was that famous poem by Rudyard Kipling. Everybody who loves Rudyard Kipling, I'm sorry, he was a terrible racist, but he had this poem called "The White Man's Burden" about how it was our job to lift up our younger brothers, and they were angry at us with it, but they would thank us one day that we had lifted them out of the sort of stupor that they were living in and brought them into civilized society. And that was a really common mentality in our culture and in our churches and in the establishment of a lot of mainline churches today that are even anti-racist. Like in the United Church and stuff, you would have had lots of people like that in the early foundations of the United Church, even though today you wouldn't find that belief at all. And so it's in there, and it's rooted in, and the only thing that we can do that makes any sense is to name it and acknowledge it and reject it. And it's the reason that I'm not it's one of many reasons that I'm not a Catholic, even though my theology in terms of philosophy and stuff like that is actually pretty close to a lot of Catholicism. Like you said, there's a lot of good teachings that are in there. The church is this big giant mixed bag that's thousands of years old, and it's done grotesque, horrible things, but it's also carried and maintained the writings of many beautiful saints who had profound insight into the nature of goodness and beauty and truth and things like that. And I think our responsibility now, if we, as Christians, if we're going to acknowledge all of the things he said and the truth of them, is that part of our repentance has to be not only to acknowledge the sinfulness of those things, but to learn how to be Christians in a way that doesn't hurt everybody else, in a way that is respectful and kind and humble and patient, and all those things that it should have been from the beginning. And that's the task that I see myself filling now. I think when the spirits told me to go preach, like I told you earlier, that's kind of what my goal is now, is to read through all these things and say, well, we could have gone this way, we could have believed this, we could have listened to Aelred, we could have done that, and reconstructing what a healthy land-based Christianity that's respectful of others would look like. Because at first I completely rejected Christianity. I was an anarchist, punk rock, nomad kind of guy, and Christianity for me was the symbol of empire and corruption. And I hated it.
haven't graduated from there.
Neither have I.
I'm
Neither have
still there.
I often say to people, like, people have all these conversion stories of Jesus spoke to them and they realized the truth, and I'm like, I was a reluctant convert. I did not want to be a preacher. I felt convicted that I needed to follow the advice of the spirits, who I felt when I went in ceremony and asked them for an answer, they gave me one, and so I followed it, and I did it because I loved and trusted the Thunderbirds, not because I actually wanted to be a Christian. And it took me a long time to come around and actually understand why I was even here, to be honest. It took me a long time to figure that out and to find a way to be here that made any sense to me. But it means I'm completely independent and not attached to any church at all, and I'm regularly attacked for heresy.
That tracks, Justin. That tracks.
Yeah. So that's my thought on it. I think you're right. Go ahead and harsh on Christianity. We need it.
Well, the other thing that I'm like, what I find confusing for me is like I just have a hard time with, I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God any more than all of us are.
Mm-hmm.
And do I believe that Jesus was a real person? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, he was probably Palestinian, and uh, obviously had some effect and some influence with the ways that he was challenging the powers that be at the time. And the things that got written in the books got written after, well, a long time after he had existed, on the earth. And so there was probably some, liberal interpretation to what he had said or what he had done in, there was an agenda for the way in which things were written down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a hard time when people are so rigid with this, like, a one belief. And I think where that comes from for me is that in my language, the language of my community, in the traditional way of thinking, not my Christian aunties, but the way that is spoken in the language, the word for creator or God is the great mystery, right? And because of that, it leaves it open to understand that you don't know everything, and you can't know everything. You can't be definitive about everything. And you always have to be open to the idea that there's things that you don't know, you know? And and so, like, the rigidity of the belief system, not just of Christianity, but any kind of organized religion where it becomes like very rigid, right? Like that's what where it comes in conflict to how my entire like language informs and my traditions in terms of understanding spirituality is much more fluid. And I'm open to the idea um that there's multiple spirits, there's multiple like that the trees themselves communicate with people when you want to. You can go have a conversation with them and they can like you when you made your offerings or you did whatever and they spoke to you and told you a path that would be good for you to take. I believe in that. I believe in giving our offerings to the fire and fasting and those things. And each of us only gets a little pinch of it, right? A little tiny, we get a little vision. We don't get the whole thing. And I think where I come into conflict with Christianity is the way that it says this is the way it is without any, like there's no questioning. You have to believe this way. And if you don't believe this way, then I mean, not everyone, but some of the more extreme, right? The more
Yeah.
extreme fundamentalist sects are like all about like, yeah, you just are gonna burn in the you're gonna burn in hell for your beliefs, which is, I mean, that's obviously the extreme. That's
Yeah.
not the majority. But it's just this rigidity, I
Hmm.
think, is where I have the personal internal uh, inability
Hmm.
to to take it to any heart because I
Hmm.
can't I can't I can't. It's too rigid for my understanding of this world. This world is filled with too much mystery and too much unknown for me to definitively say. Like, for example, this one elder, he was asked, my auntie told me that this person had come to him with tobacco and said, I want to understand what happens after you die. And he says, well, how do I know? I haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
And so it's like this kind of like sort of and I'm sure you've been around elders like that are like they don't definitively know and they won't
Yeah.
they won't tell you that they definitively know one way or another. It's the rigidity that it goes against it's I forget that word, anathema. I think it's like it's against my being of how
Yeah.
to
The
exist in
concept
the
of
world.
anathema is anathema to you.
So that's,
It
I
is
mean,
also to me. I read the heretics freely, and that's one of the things I get in trouble with, and that's where you find a lot of the best stuff too.
I mean, fundamentally, what
Yeah.
we have in common between all people in the world is hopefully is a sense of morality, a sense of being good to one another, compassion, honesty, truth. Like the seven grandfathers' teachings are not in conflict with
That's
other teachings of religions around the world. And so those are like that's what I like hope to find is like where do we all land on the same thing? And right in that zone is probably where the truth lies. Everything else might just be a story that somebody passed down to one another. And so, but wherever it is that the whole world comes together on those where we can all agree, that's probably the truth. That's the foundation.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Definitely, Isaac Senior, who I spent so much time with, just said over and over and over and over again that love is the thing, and that when you learn love, you've learned it all, and it's universal, and it transcends culture and language and race and gender and anything else. And that is certainly very compatible with Christian teaching, with the understanding that God is love. And as Christ says, or as Paul says, in Christ there is no male or female, Jew or Gentile, slave or free, for all are one. All are one in God.
Yeah, you see, like that is the
Yeah.
same, right? So I feel like there's places that we can go to find these things. And I've heard one of my elders too, he's passed on now, but he used to say that all the time. He used to say love is all there is. Like and he used to say everything is interconnected. Love is
Yeah.
all there is. And as a young punk or a young rebel, I'm no longer that, but when I was, young and very, very much more rebellious, I used to, you know, sort of push back on that within myself. I would never dare to like disrespect an elder, right? If that's what they're teaching, they have a reason for teaching it, and it's up to me to like take that within myself and really find the truth of what they're trying to get at. And so but sometimes it takes kind of years to sort of get to that level of maturity to be able to go, yeah, okay, I really get what they're saying, actually. I really do truly understand it. And as I get older, the older I get, the more I dive into it hard, right? Like my compassion for everybody, my love for everything and everybody just grows stronger and stronger and stronger as I get older. And that informs me on my moral compass on how to behave in the world in a way that there is no question when it comes to harming another person. There's no permissible harm to another, you know what I mean? Or anything else. There's no permissible going against the laws of nature. It becomes like, no, we have to embrace all of the love and all of the natural law and everything that we've ever been taught. And that is the path for all of us to have a world forward for the next generations.
Yeah. Well, I can't top that, so I will just say thank you. Thank you for giving me your time, and thank you for all of your wisdom, and also thank you for catching up. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see
Um,
you too. This is the hardest YouTube interview I've ever done in my life.
really?
Yeah.
Well,
No,
we'll have to
I
have a
had to
second
go.
one, a follow up, and you can tell me whether or not Art is alive. Um,
And we never even got into like art. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's okay.
Art
It's
is
okay.
life.
We got where we needed to go. That's what I was always taught in ceremony, that there are no mistakes, and wherever you ended up is where you were supposed to be when you set your intention. That nothing can falter it. So
Yeah.
here we are, and yeah, I'll let you go, and I'll see you around sometime. But thank you very much.
It's nice to see you, Justin.
Yeah, take care,
Okay.
Christy.
Bye.